Good morning, everyone. My name is Marta Mesa, and I'm the director of Slow Food Europe. Thank you for joining the third and last session of the Food Trails breakfast debates on the role cities play in building sustainable food systems. For those of you who do not know us, throughout its projects, Slow Food is on the front line defending biodiversity and ecosystems, the rights of farmers, fishers, food artisans, and we pay specific attention to indigenous people, youth, women, and migrant communities, and agroecology and small-scale farming are central to achieve sustainable food system in our strategy. Slow Food is a proud partner of Food Trails, a project that aims to develop urban food policies across 11 cities in Europe through the active participation of citizens and make sure cities are key actors in the transition towards sustainable food systems. Today, we will hear from two exceptional speakers on the role of cities for sustainable food systems, and we will explore how to achieve healthy and inclusive food environments for all citizens, and how cities and the European Commission are responding to the challenges ahead of us in terms of food sustainability. So before getting to the heart of these questions, I just want to ask Elisa Porreca, who's of the team coordinating the Food Trails project for the city of Milan, to say a few words. Elisa.
Good morning everyone, and thank you, Marta. Let me greet our speakers for today, and let me say a few words about Food Trails. So Food Trails is a research project funded by Horizon 2020. And for the next years, will be led by the municipality of Milan and a partnership of 19 European partners that includes universities, foundations, and associations, and also 11 large and medium-sized cities. I spoke about cities mainly because the Food Trails goal is to design, test, and develop altogether 11 food policies in these cities. And we really have the ambition to co-design the next generation of food policies in urban areas. We won't do it alone, of course, because each city will activate its own living lab to involve citizens, associations, universities, and the private sector for the development of its local food policies and for pilot action that will be financed by Food Trails. We want to innovate public procurement, urban agriculture, school canteens, and food waste actions. We will do even more by designing their economic sustainability through impact financing, because cities active on food policies are able to monitor and assess their impacts. All this is the result of many years of work done with the Eurocities Working Group Food and with the cities of the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact in Europe. And with this perspective in mind, we are trying to prove how cities are ready to sit at the table of European stakeholders and to really transform together the food system to make it more sustainable and inclusive. So have a good breakfast dialogue.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Elisa. And indeed, it's very exciting to be here today with the two speakers who I'm going to introduce now, precisely because we have the Green Deal on the table, and we do have the fantastic experience of many cities across Europe that are really putting in practice already now strategies to promote sustainable food systems. So with us today, we have Gijs Schilthuis. He's the head of unit of the Directorate General in charge of agriculture and rural development, and he leads a team assessing agricultural policy perspectives. Gijs has worked on agricultural policy reform at DG AGRI since 2008, and he first joined the European Commission in 2005 at the DG for Health and Consumers, what's nowadays Sante. Thank you for being with us, Gijs. And let me welcome also Franciska Rosenkilde. She is the Mayor of Culture and Leisure at the city of Copenhagen. Before taking up the post in 2018, she was a member of the Health and Care Committee and the Children and Youth Committee. And she has a professional bachelor's degree in health and nutrition from Metropole University and a master's degree in geography from the University of Copenhagen. And before working in politics, she worked as a professional chef. So somebody with really hands-on experience on food. Thank you both for being with us. So let me go ahead with the first question we have for you, Franciska, and that is, how is Copenhagen putting sustainability into practice through its work on food systems?
Yeah, thank you very much, Marta, and good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. I will start by explaining in Copenhagen, we have had a sustainability goal since 2001 with the target of reaching 90% organic in all our public food procurement. And this is along with improving the quality of 70,000 daily meals public, and is being produced in the city and upscaling also the kitchen staff in approximately 1,000 food producing units across the city. So right now we are in a process currently at 84% organic, but the overall goal is still the 90%. And also in 2019, the city of Copenhagen launched its 2019 food strategy. And the food strategy builds on top of the sustainability goals that underpin the organic conversion, such as the protection of biodiversity and clean water supply. The food strategy sets also a very climate-friendly perspective and has a very ambitious goal to reduce emissions stemming from the public food system with 25% by 2025. So the new thing is the interlink between the health and the environment and the climate. So you can't really work with these separately, but it has a huge bonus when you work with them together because they are so interlinked. We have to have the healthy bodies with the healthy earth and the healthy climate. So the new thing here in 2019 is that kind of perspective where you look at all of these things together in developing the public meals in Copenhagen, which is, as I said, around 70,000 every day. So we have very ambitious goals.
Fantastic, great to hear, and also very interesting to hear that you're approaching this in a comprehensive way. So you talked about the health of people, of the planet, of food, and everything at once. Thank you so much, Franciska. And Gijs, to you, the transition to sustainable food systems requires a collective approach involving public authorities at all levels of governance, including cities. And this is also mentioned in the Farm to Fork strategy. So what are the opportunities to bring in cities as key actors in the transition to sustainable food system, as indeed it's envisaged in the Farm to Fork strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Marta, for having me as well. It's a great pleasure to have breakfast with you all, and also very nice to be here with Franciska Rosenkilde, because the city of Copenhagen has already been an inspiration for us for a long time. We had speakers from the city of Copenhagen several years ago already in our Agricultural Outlook conference, which gathered a lot of people thinking about future development of agriculture and food policy. So cities are clearly a key element. So what do we envisage practically in the Farm to Fork strategy? I think there's a number of angles that you can look at when talking about cities. We just heard from the city of Milan. The city of Milan is also participating in our food waste panel, and the work on food waste reduction is a very important component of this holistic approach of the Farm to Fork strategy. The Commission is going to come forward also with targets on this later in the process. So that is already an element where I think cooperation with cities is very important. Also, we just heard about a project under the Horizon 2020 program, the research program of the European Commission. In fact, there are several projects under this banner, a total of 9 major research projects linking cities to food, often brought together under the Food 2030 name. Food Shift 2030 is another project that is very interesting, supporting cities, policy labs, city labs, in fact trying to nurture developments and also to bring together different cities, because I really believe that this is cities about the grassroots of food policy development. but we need to link these different developments so they can benefit each other, and also that we in Brussels can learn from it. So I think the research program efforts are very important, and also under Horizon Europe, the new research program that is starting, there is going to be a major focus on urban food system transformation. It's one of the priorities for the next 7-year research program. So that's also really important. And then I think if you look at money and support that we can provide to cities under European Regional Development Fund, there is a dedicated stream of money for sustainable urban development, and that is clearly the funding possibilities that cities have, and that need to be programmed in cooperation with their member state. But there is clearly also a focus on the sustainable development in cities that can be used. As you know, the Farm to Fork strategy is part of the European Green Deal. Part of this holistic approach is very much like the reference to health, environment, climate that was mentioned earlier. We're trying to look at not only the food policies under Farm to Fork, but under a much wider range of policies. And within the Green Deal, the European Climate Pact is the vehicle for the engagement with the wider civil society and with Europe. And the platform under the Climate Pact is also the basis on which we want to engage with communities to exchange a sustainable, local, circular, inclusive food system. So I think that is also a very important component of our efforts under the Farm to Fork strategy. I'd like to leave it at this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gijs. That was already a lot of information, and you've been speaking about indeed already engaging in conversations with cities like that of Copenhagen. Thank you also for mentioning all the resources that are already there and what are the opportunities really to push forward these efforts to develop sustainable food systems. So now the second question, again, back to you, Franciska, and that is, what is Copenhagen doing specifically on sustainable food procurement?
Yeah, I think that, as was just mentioned, that the cities really have this, being this driver for the whole green transition of our societies. And throughout the continual demand for organic and seasonal food in our public meals, Copenhagen has helped shape actually the whole food service market of organic food in Denmark, which has doubled since 2015. So as being these big cities actually serving a lot of public meals every day, it is really a driver for the whole transition of the agriculture and how we produce and what we produce. So that is very important. And also I forgot to mention before about food waste, which is obviously a central thing in the whole sustainable meal. So we also have, of course, a focus on that. And also we have structured the social and sustainability criteria on our last tender of the Sustainable Development Goals. It is very important also to, when you produce much more sustainable meals in the public meals, we also have to educate people on as an inspirational to put these sustainable meals back to their homes. So in Denmark we also have very green and climate friendly nutritional advice from the government, and all of these things combined is a way to as a political institution to set the goals and move forward, but also to be inspiring to the public and to how to live your everyday life, because most of the Danes, they want to live more sustainable than they're doing, but it is hard to make these transitions. And when you're in the supermarket and you're busy and tired and the kids are screaming, you just take what you're used to, because that's how we do. But we also know with the very accelerating climate crisis that we have to change some of our behaviors, and it is easier for some than others. And I think it's also a political responsibility to make these sustainable choices the easy one. So that is why we also have an ambition in the party I'm from to encourage people, inspiring people to how to change your diet to a much more sustainable and climate-friendly diet, much more than the regulation part. I think it's a combination of both of them. But the importance here is how to also take responsibility for your city or your municipality and make it into a conscious climate choice. So when you make the public meal strategy, or you buy things for the municipality or the city, think sustainable, think in a much more climate-friendly way. Thank you.
Thank you, Franciska. And again, it's great, like you also boiled it down to the reality of everyday life and how difficult at times it can be to go for the sustainable option, and that how that should be the easiest option really, and how that can happen. And so back to you, Gijs. To improve the availability and price of sustainable food and to promote healthy and sustainable diets in institutional catering, the Commission will determine the best way of setting minimum mandatory criteria for sustainable food procurement. Could you update us on the state of play and the next steps?
Yes, that's a very clear question. I was inspired by Franciska's vivid description of being in a supermarket at 6 o'clock with screaming children. But the first advice I can give from Brussels is try to avoid going hungry with screaming children to a supermarket. I think that improves the sustainability of your choice. But back to your question on the mandatory sustainability criteria for food in public procurement. So we see public procurement as a great vehicle to drive to change consumer choice, to help consumers make sustainable choices, together with a number of other instruments. And on this particular one, we are developing legislation for framework legislation for sustainable food systems, which is foreseen for 2023. And in fact, these criteria for food public procurement are going to be part of this framework legislation. And this is foreseen for 2023, but obviously before that we need to do an impact assessment. And currently we have an ongoing process with the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. They're doing they have established an expert group with experts of many representing many aspects of the food chain in the EU. To try to develop building blocks for this legislation. So also in that context, these minimum criteria are discussed. So there is still a bit of way to go before we will see a proposal with these criteria. But I think I should underline that we don't want to wait for that. I mean, we realize 2030 is tomorrow. If you look at farmers, they say, well, it's 8-9 growing seasons. It's not a long time. So we also have published an action plan on organic farming just end of March. And in that action plan, we actually cite the good example of the city of Copenhagen on public procurement, because currently we have a framework which is called green public procurement, which is mainly focused on the environmental aspects. And we engage now in this organic action plan to really boost awareness of this possibilities of green public procurement. So we want to already move ahead in helping cities to change the way they do public procurement already today, while later on we'll come with these minimum criteria. So we have a multi-layer approach to this, but we really want to underline the power that is in, and also the financial power that is in public procurement. And I think what Franciska said is also very true, is that it's not just changing the terms of your contract. There is much more, I think, behind it. So I think we need to see this as it's best seen as part of a much broader development of how you do your purchasing as public authorities, how you engage with the agricultural systems around your city with others who are part of this supply chain. So it's part of a broader picture, but we're very much engaged also on this topic. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And indeed, many pieces of the puzzle really have to come together for the transition to truly happen. Before we pick a few questions that were posted in the chat, and thank you for all those of you who've been commenting and posting some questions, I just want to give a chance to both of you, Franciska and Gijs, to maybe still comment, if you wish, to what you've been hearing from each other so far this morning. If any of you wants to. Franciska.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's very nice to hear that that we also can be ambitious on this topic on an EU level, because the more it seems to, the more further away it gets from everyday life, the harder it is to kind of be ambitious about it, because as there's still a political want for growth and for securing the agricultural business. So I think it's very important that we as politicians now understand that the climate crisis must be our #1 concern, and it's not about putting green solutions into the system that is already our problem, but actually trying to see it, as she said, in a broader perspective, to change the whole ecosystem and be much more eco-friendly in our way of thinking our municipalities and our cities. So I would like for you maybe to reflect a little bit more about how, as a EU institutional level, that you can participate in having not only the economical perspective of growth, but also how do we thrive, not only economically, but also environmentally and socially. Thank you.
Thank you, Franciska. Gijs, would you like to comment or respond?
Yes, thank you very much. I think it's a very good point there. So and I think that is what the European Commission is also trying to achieve with the Green Deal, and to change the system and to think differently about our food system in particular in this case. But obviously, economics is part of the game. So let me also underline that. I think one of the key elements that Executive Vice President Timmermans always underlines is that it needs to be a fair transition. We need to take everybody along. Often the talk about the sustainability of food drives us to the discussion about the affordability of food. And I know from the examples of your colleagues in Copenhagen that this has been part of the thinking, and that you, if I remember the presentations from several years ago correctly, were able to not increase cost while putting on the table a more sustainable plate. So this was an example that I have remembered because it means it is feasible to do so. But this economic aspect is extremely important also for consumers. But I work for DG Agriculture, so for us it's also very important that the systems change in farming, more sustainable farming. For some farmers this means there's a number of choices. For other farmers it means changing the way they farm more holistically, because they choose to move into, for example, organic farming. All these choices need to be financially viable, and very important is that the market rewards this. That's why public procurement is important. That's also why we have a number of labeling initiatives, because we want to bring out the sustainability attributes of products. But that's also why it's very important that we have an agricultural policy. Right now we are negotiating with the European Parliament and the Council the future environmental policy, agricultural policy, that this agricultural policy provides resources for farmers, particularly to compensate for the costs of some steps they take at farm level to improve environmental viability. So I think we need to also, I'm moving away now from your holistic pitch and to say, look at not just economics, but I also want to make a plea. Yes, we need to also, and I think that's also a responsibility from us at the European Commission to make sure that the economic picture matches, because when that matches, other things may also flow from that. And maybe a last point I wanted to make, but that's more also because we're here a bit under the chairmanship of Slow Food, is that I think also that it's very important to look at the to look at not just foods as such, but to have to look at the wider picture of gastronomy and the tradition of foods. One of the things we focus on a lot is not just organic farming, but also geographical indications, which are made with a lot of care for tradition and are often rooted in history and a particular agricultural characteristics of certain regions. So I think it's very important to also bring that to the front and make sure that a food transition is also rooted in those traditions. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Gijs, also for having mentioned that. And yeah, if we look at that, that's a great way of raising awareness, taking people by their taste. And it's also great added value, like the biodiversity of foods we have in each region is like the unique economic added value, if you want as well, that, you know, we have across Europe, and if we also want to look at economic terms. So this is not the end of the conversation, and we do hope that the two of you continue engaging, and we will create opportunities through the Food Trace project to encourage this kind of exchanges. But now we have we handpicked a couple of questions from the audience. Apologies if your question was not handpicked. There were many good ones, but here is the first one, and it's really for both of you. So the question is, we know that the Farm to Fork is planning to introduce minimum mandatory criteria for food procurement across Europe, as mentioned. However, one of the main ambitions of cities related to food is to create shorter food supply chains. This is currently a challenge as EU procurement rules formally do not allow to procure local foods. Is there a plan to also look at this in the coming months, thinking of food as a right and not as an exception, thinking of food as a right and therefore as an exception to EU market rules? I don't know who of the two of you wants to go first.
Shall I?
Yeah,
Franciska, you want to? No, I'll keep it. I'll keep it very short. So this is always an interesting an issue, and it's come up a lot in the discussions around COVID as well, because several farmers, of course, tried to sell more locally in this crisis situation. So to answer the question straight on, I don't know if there's any plans to change rules on whether you can prioritize local foods. The thing is here that, of course, we are working here with rules that are made for the European internal market. And one of the cornerstones is they don't want to discriminate between different member states. That is what the principle of the rule is based on. But I believe that some cities have made sure that they can source more locally by saying we want a product that is in season. So there are ways to use the current rules to make sure that you get products that are coming from closer by. And I also want to make a warning. I think I've nothing against producing locally. On the contrary, it's probably a very good idea. But on the other hand, cities are by nature concentration of a lot of people. And obviously, you need a wider area to feed those people. So you cannot procure everything locally. So local is not necessarily always the solution. Also, if you look at the climate footprint, for example, local and short supply chains are not always the best. So we need, I think, and that also is very important for the resilience of the food system, making sure we always have food, is to have a good combination of both local short supply chains, but also of longer supply chains and international trade to provide for our food. Thank you.
Thank you, Gijs. Franciska?
Yeah, I think it's actually a very central question, because I believe that one of the big challenges of our whole food supply is that it is too globalized, actually, because in Denmark we almost only produce meat, And of course, we want to produce much more plant-based food for humans and not animals. So I think it's a very central question in the whole sustainable transition of our agriculture. In Copenhagen, actually in Denmark, we are now reducing some of the regulations on how much is allowed to buy from the farmer themselves. And for Copenhagen, we have more and more, what can you say, deals with local farmers to buy, and also to give them a security of how to, when they produce, they can sell their goods. So it is more and more, but it is actually, I believe, when you talk about tradition, it is a little bit as it used to be, going away from this very industrial perspective and moving back or further in understanding that the food supply has to be local, and we have to produce food for people and not for animals. And we need to have a much more diverse production of greens and plant-based foods in Denmark, but also in other European countries, of course. So I think it's one of the key thinking of how to transition our agricultural systems.
Thank you so much, Franciska. So not just combining different lengths of supply chains, but really diversifying local food systems for much more sustainable productions at all levels, and going back to the health of food, of people, of the climate and the environment. Thank you so much. This is the end of the breakfast this morning, and please do continue following us. We will engage in further conversations, and you find information on the Food Trace project in the chat. And yes, looking forward to further conversations with all of you. Thank you so much. Keep up the good work.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you very much for being here today.
Yes.